Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa alihi wa sahbihi. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. We're here with another episode of Convert Conversations. I am your host, Kevin Omar Lopez Castellanos, and today we got a great host. Uh, in our chat, he's listed under Justin Cole, but that is actually the American name of a beloved brother who's been on the show already, brother Adil, and this is his eldest son, Sajid. So we're going to be exploring his unique story, how he grew up being raised by two parents who are converts to Islam, the unique experience of what it is to be the child of converts, and how it is pursuing Islam in that perspective. And hopefully this will be a wonderful episode. So without further ado, Brother Sajid, if you may introduce yourself.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Sajid Cole. As the brother stated, I'm the son of Adil or Justin Cole. I'm using his Zoom link just, for it's easier to do this way. But yeah, I'm living here out in Cairo, Egypt. I have been doing so for about a year and a half now, and I'm just, studying knowledge right now and looking forward to spending time with my beloved brother, City Kevin, inshallah, today.
Alhamdulillah. I'm really grateful you've taken time out of your intense studies to do this with us. And a lot of us here at Atlanta, we miss you guys. We miss you, Zahid, Azara, and now your parents. We miss having y'all here. Just a quick note: Brother Adol and his family have been like the heart and soul, the main hosts of our Mawlid sessions here in Atlanta. Like we really miss their company. I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves, and may Allah keep you in the best of health and spirits. And inshallah, when you guys come back for a visit, we do a great mawlid, like bring back some of that bring back some of that magic you got from Egypt here. But
Alhamdulillah, I feel
alhamdulillah.
honored, but at the same time, I must remain humble and,
Yeah, of course. But anyways, so normally we begin with asking our hosts their conversion stories, but like I would like to do a unique take on this because of course, you were born into Islam, but of course you're the also the son of converts. So if you could explain to us like what is in very brief terms, what is your story to Islam? Being raised in it, but having parents who are converts and thus have had to develop their deen as they went along, especially when it came to raising you and your brother and your sisters. So if you may explain your journey to Islam and eventually how it's led the major milestones and how it's led to your current situation now studying sacred knowledge in Egypt.
yeah, Bismillah. Um, so yeah, I have kind of a unique story, I would think. I mean, me and my siblings. Um, like you stated, my parents were, as we were growing up, my parents did were going through their journey, and I kind of understood what was going on, but at the same time, I was like still a kid, so I didn't like um get a lot of things until a lot later in life. So, so the first we lived in a lot of states throughout my early childhood years. And the first state that I distinctly remember living in was Georgia, um, from like the ages of 4 to 6 and 6, 6, 7. Um, and I didn't really think much about, I mean, I knew I was Muslim, but I didn't really think much about like, Islam the way I think about now. Like we didn't go to a lot of the things that people know us by, like you've mentioned, mouths and stuff. Like we weren't doing a lot of that back in those days. And I think it was because my father and my mother was going through their own spiritual progression at that point in life. And then we moved to Tennessee. Or first we moved to Texas, and then we moved to Tennessee. And in Tennessee is where we know the first Seekers Guidance Retreat, I think it was. It was near Knoxville. And that was like the first time I was introduced to like the Sufi scene, as people could say. And then ever since then, I kind of had like an awareness of like, even though I didn't understand what a Sufi meant, anytime like people would like mention about Sufis, I would be like, I'm not a goofy Sufi basically. But so then we went to Maryland. We got hooked onto the Al community that was starting up about that time. This was like the years 2013, 2014. Um, and then in Michigan, we were with Sheikh Abdul Karim Yahya's community that was there. So it was like about that time that I was started to understand, like I was like what, 14, 15 at the time. And that was the time that I started to like, understand like what the path my father has put his family on. Like, he studied Shafi fiqh. I started to understand like what, a madhab was and like what akida we follow and different aspects of tasawwuf. And then I read this book, um, which I think had like a profound influence effect on my life. Um, it's called The Misquoting Muhammad by Dr. Jonathan A.C. Brown. I read that when I was 16 as we were going on this family road trip that my whole family went on. It was the year 2018 to 2019 around that time. And yeah, that had a profound influence on that. Like that book, it like to me at the time, not so much nowadays, but at the time it felt like the perfect vessel to like see through the different versions of Islam, or maybe it's versions isn't a good way to say it, but
More like the interpretations.
yeah, different interpretations, different schools, different ways to practice the deen or whatever. And I was felt like after reading that book, I was able to like get a better grasp of, and ever since a better grasp of studying Dean. And ever since then, I've kind of always like before I was like, oh yeah, I'll study knowledge one day, but I didn't really understand like what that meant to go study knowledge. But then after that, I was like, yeah, I want to go study knowledge. And so yeah, that's kind of basically where that, led me
Yeah,
up to.
yeah, alhamdulillah. So going further into that, because the 90s were known as an era of like when Salafism was really taking a grasp, but at the same time, as a counter to that, when Tasawwuf, the practice of Tasawwuf and Sufism also had a unique intake into the American Muslim community. So like there was like the side of like the very strict Salafis who were like you were very strict in their practice, how they dress, how they talk, but then there was the Sufis where we wouldn't say actually I wouldn't even say Sufis, like more like how your father would describe it, those who wanted to practice traditional classical Sunni Islam, that's how he would say it. Those who were more in line of teaching Islam the way we have traditionally for a millennia, the especially through the Hadith of Jibril, that there was a balance between Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. So like as your parents were begin and as you described, your parents were developing that journey. It's not like they had it all together when you're kidding, you're the eldest. So
The
you,
son,
huh?
Asha's still older than me, but
Yeah, never mind. But like as one of the eldest, you had
right.
a first row seat to that. You had a first. So if I may, what is something that you would relate to our audience, especially those who are converts or who knows, maybe we might have other children of converts watching this along with us. What advice would you give to them on the concept of like developing your journey? Because many people would assume like, oh, because you're born into it, you're going to have it all together by the time that you're a teenager or an adult or something. But like, as you have stated yourself, just like with your parents, you were developing your journey as you went along, and you're still doing that. And that's part of why you're in Egypt. And it's a beautiful step, but it's another chapter in this journey to seeking the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala. So, what advice would you give? Like any, just one sentence of advice would you give for those in your situation?
Yeah, I don't know. about giving advice to converts since I don't have that relatability to a certain extent. I mean, I could give some like basic advice, but to children of converts, I think I've always, felt that it was kind of important to like address like especially kids who like me had parents that both of them are converts, like not like one of them's convert and one of them's, was born into Islam. Um, and I always felt that it was important because you can, feel free to disagree with this statement, but for converts, they kind of like grew up having like a cultural understanding. And for us or at least for me, but I feel like most children of converts also might feel this way, like those who are born of two converts specifically, is that, because you don't have that cultural upbringing, like it's just like your parents basically. You don't have like cousins who share the same religion. You don't have grandparents share the same religion. So, different Islamic events like doing Eid, Ramadan, it always felt a little bit lonely to a certain extent because, you didn't have, visiting grandparents' house and like, having the family over and having family dinners and celebrating the holidays together. So, I don't know. I don't know if I have that much advice about how to get through that. To me, it's just more of the outcome of what happened is that I feel like it kind of made the internal family stronger. Like, I feel like I'm closer to my siblings and parents than most, other, people who might have, backgrounds that are different from mine because, I feel like I have, it's just the bond is more because to me it's like the only thing you have, so you take it more for not granted, you take it more
Yeah,
for
absolutely. Especially since from speaking with your other siblings and also your parents, a lot of the times they must have felt like it was probably y'all against the world, especially
yeah,
with because um brother Adol and your sister Asha have told me that there have not every community you've been a part of was like accepting of y'all. So, of course, there is that necessity where it's like you stick together because you don't know much. And like, I don't know what's your relationship with your non-Muslim family, but like, I would imagine that your parents would have at least wanted you to have some kind of relationship with them. But when you're definitely wanting to practice Islam and live an Islamic lifestyle, and when your extended family's just not doing that, it can be hard to relate. And I speak this as a convert where most of my family is either Catholic or like, well, I would say nominally Catholic, and then there's the few practicing. And it's like I would like, and yeah, my sister has participated in Ramadan fasting with me for more for a friend than me, but and then my parents, like, I try to give them presents for Eid and my family, but it's like it's not the same as like them actually joining you for iftars or for dinners or going to Taraweeh prayers or reading Quran together. It must feel kind of lonely, where it's like it's y'all against the world. And
yeah,
and of course, like you said, moving around a lot, road trips, doing things together. I would imagine uh, you your siblings are just not you're not just your siblings, they're your best friends.
yeah, definitely. Which is
Uh,
it's kind of sad to some people. And looking back, I feel like I missed out on some things. Sometimes I feel that. But at the same time, it is what it is. Alhamdulillah, get through the
Alhamdulillah.
day. And it's different, and it's probably even better to rely more on people, that's always gonna have your back than, people that you might not see or might, lose touch with you and stuff. So
Yeah,
um,
alhamdulillah. So I would imagine like because you were developing this as you go went along with your parents, like what would you say are the most distinct things that uh you remember were like the biggest milestones in your journeys as Muslims as and also developing as a Muslim family unit?
yeah. So when I was younger, um I think like I said, my parents were like starting to like understand like, like what my father would say. classical Sunni Islam. He had a very strict idea about that at first, from from what I've heard, that he basically took and I think he even mentions this in the episode he talked with you. He took the reliance of the traveler and like, and alhamdulillah, because he didn't have that much people around him and he didn't have like access to like Islamic learning to be able to I mean like that Islamic scholarship, like, top tier Islamic scholarship to um take access from. And so he's basically like he took the reliance of the traveler and he kind of like made that his guide to how to practice Islam through, a long time. And that it's probably a good book. I haven't read through it fully myself, but it's not something that you can find, especially like um through like spiritual wayfaring. Like it's not a book that guides you through that. It's like a
Yeah, because
very,
it's primarily a book on fiqh, on jurisprudence.
yeah.
But
So
but I would say like and in the book Talim Muta'alim, that's a very standard book that a lot of people would say you give to a beginning student of knowledge. One thing that helps with your spiritual development is to have a firm grasp of jurisprudence, because like then it gives you like the discipline needed to like truly embrace spiritual practices. Or what are your opinions on that?
I haven't looked through that book, but I'm pretty sure it's a good book. My thing is just the point I was gonna get to is that, early through our lives, like we didn't we didn't go through a lot of like in early in our lives, like we didn't go through a lot of like I stated, like we didn't like have access to that, different spiritual, or classical Muslim communities. And so you know, I feel like early in life, because my father only had like his Islam was based off of, a few books. It was very like a book learned faith that, there was a lot of, um I don't want to say growing pains, but like, stuff that happened, just by having like a mindset that's kind of like that sort of way. And it lasted until about, I would say we went to like the first Mikasa retreats.
Yeah,
And so that was like a very, like when you mentioned like life turners, that was a basically like, the first time, like even though we went to Seeker's Guidance before, I didn't really like connect with like a community before like that until like came to Makassid. And then, that kind of like opened like a whole new world. Like, even though I still didn't understand like these things like classicalism or traditionalism when it relates to Islam, it's still like, it connected me, it connected me to a community that I felt and to me it was like, this is the only way basically. Like
yeah,
this is the way. Just because, my parents, took me to it and I aspired and was inspired by the presence, even though I didn't understand a lot was being said, but I was
yeah,
inspired by the different scholars and stuff.
yeah. And
Um, and
no,
Hmm?
continue, please.
Another, and like I said, another life-changing experience was the book by Jonathan A.C. Brown, the Misquoted Muhammad book. I read that in like 2, 3 weeks. I think it was like one of the fastest read books I've did in my life. But then another book that it kind of like was a stumbling block in me wanting to pursue knowledge. So first, in like 2019, I wanted to go to this school, this all boys school in Memphis. Um, I wasn't accepted because of my age at the time, but my little brother, he went. So I was kind of like just like chilling, doing, finishing up my high school, um, when COVID hit in like March 2020. And around that time, I read this book also by Dr. Jonathan A.C. Brown. It was called Slavery in Islam. And that book had like it kind of like disturbed me to a extent that people might be surprised to hear, but I'm not gonna get too into it. But at the time, like even though I felt like I got a grasp about like what traditionalism and Islamic learning is to to relate to my own life, to like apply it to my own life and even just like intellectual thinking, like, because at that time I got a lot into disproving like liberalist Islam and even though I never got into these conversations, I wanted to. Um, Liberalist Islam, trying to like, what's it called? Syncretic Islam, try to merge Islam with other faiths and, go against like a lot of stuff I saw on YouTube, like people talking bad about Islam and trying to prove why Islam is the one and only true religion. That was, what I tried to contextualize. And I felt like um, that book, the Misquoted Muhammad book, kind of gave me like a way to like navigate through those things. And then when I read Slavery in Islam, because my whole idea was just like basically like projected from this book, that when I saw something that kind of like slightly, you know, showed the tradition that I was learning about to be like, you know, to me, it seemed kind of flawed. And it kind of just like shattered a lot of preconceived notions that I had at the time. And so then after that, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I read different books. I read this book called the African Caliphate, which is a book about the Shehu of Osman Dan Fodio.
Rahimahullah
Um,
ta'ala.
well, um, and just like trying to like reconnect in that sort of sense, like trying to reconnect with like African Islam, like try to feel like,
Yeah,
make
do you feel like
try
in a way that kind of like uh gave you like a full circle moment of your journey in terms of like you were kind of tracing some of the same steps that your father took
yeah, yeah,
and
that's true.
your mom
I was trying
probably.
to, I was trying to, I was trying to reconnect, my my social background that I was becoming all as much aware of as I grow older. Even though younger, you don't really like when I was a kid, I would be like, yeah, I'm Euro or African American. I don't really, care to an extent. But then when I grew older, I was like, yeah, how do I connect being perceived as, people will automatically probably perceive me as black, outside of black communities. When I'm around black communities, they assume I'm like half Mexican or or
Here's
Native.
and the funny thing is I'm the actual half Mexican here.
Yep.
But alhamdulillah, that's actually the
And
next question I wanted to ask. Like, what do
I
you
was gonna get a
feel?
reaction.
Yeah, what do you feel is like the lessons you've learned in like I've asked your father his experiences of like having to understand, him as a white man married to a black woman and raising mixed race children and also keeping Islam and keeping these traditions alive. But like, how do you, what are some of the reflections you could share as like being a mixed race kid who's also a Muslim and an American and trying to find your identity in all these different identities and also like having and how it's like painted your perceptions that you've taken to Egypt and like how's your time in Egypt molded your mentality to what it is now?
Hmm. Yeah, that's good question. So I'm gonna finish a little bit on the question asked before real quick.
Please.
So after reading those books, I uh for a long time I wanted to like, ground myself in Islamic learning. So I wanted to try to get into like an Islamic learning program. And for 2 years I was just kind of like, having that, kind of, you know, digesting in my head and or whatever. Um, and so then finally, I was gonna go to this program. I wasn't accepted, and then I was accepted into Taysir Seminary in Knoxville, and then that kind of like helped me ground myself in the Islamic tradition, because I heard like different, being there, you study different things that seems contradictory to the Islamic tradition. And to me, hearing those things, I felt, a strong sense of, um, rigidness in my faith, like trying to like, keep it grounded so that, um, it wouldn't be, I didn't want, coming back from Taysir to be unrigid, unstrict in my practice of Islam and my understanding of Islam. So anyways, I'm gonna answer the other question now. Um, so being young, um, like I said before, I didn't really think much about um being mixed. It wasn't until I moved to Michigan and I started to get a little bit older and then I heard different things, mainly from the Black community that like obviously it was like kind of like it became sort of like an obvious thing, like you're mixed, like you're have a white dad, and that's has sort of sometimes it has like a barrier in between trying to relate to different people, and especially since I grew up in what I call like the ghetto suburbs. It wasn't purely suburbs, we still had like a little bit of, not gang violence, but in the different community in the different neighborhoods I grew up in, there was a lot of kids, looking out to do, you know, different, bad things or whatever. So even though I had that understanding, I always, since of how, being homeschooled and all, we kind of, I just had like a kind of like adversity and natural dislike for uh like doing those different things. So, but it made me in the end like uh out of touch with that sort of lifestyle. So when I finally went to, be accustomed more with people that came from that background and, not having a stereotypical slang in my vocab and my way that I dress and the way that I talk. I was called out for it like numerous times. So at that time, I kind of like started to like, you know, think about like where am I placed amongst, like what type of group and what type of social standing do I have with the community as a whole. And there's this one particular, I'm not going to get into the details, the nitty-gritty details of it, but there was this one event that was an unfortunate altercation between this Desi kid, this kid that from a Desi background, and a black kid. An interaction between between me, the Desi kid, and the African American. And ever since that, it kind of like had a stinge or just like a bad feeling on my heart, because I felt like I could never be totally one way. I could never like fit in because I was obviously had like, black features, but then I could never fully be accepted in the other way because I can't I, had, things that distinctly make me not, what stereotypically people would consider um an African American, kid growing up.
So would you
So
consider
yeah.
that like that portion of your identity and also like the struggle to reconnect with your roots both racially and Islamically? You would consider that your greatest struggle as a Muslim, or is there something you could briefly mention since we only have like 7 minutes here left? But like, what would you consider in very brief terms your greatest struggle as a Muslim if it's not that?
No, I would say those were my biggest struggles when I was growing up. I mean, at least um before I was a teenager, I didn't, like I said, I didn't really care about, a lot of things that to me I was like, oh yeah, that was racist, or yeah, that was Islamophobic, or yeah, that was this, that was that. But at the time, I just kind of shrugged it off and like was like, who cares? Later, being a teenager, I struggled with it a lot. Like between the ages of 15 to around the time I went to Taysier, like 20, I was 20 years old when I went to Taysier. Like those 5 years was like I went through a lot of different changes and how I understood just myself and my racial background, identity and, the Islamic tradition, and so for some people, uh the path is like, you one major event and then, it's uphill from there. But to me, especially during that time, it was more of a wave, had high points, low points, high points again. And then, you know, I'm here and, alhamdulillah, I'm okay, I did wasn't, totally like uh completely and outstandingly affected by those things, but at the same time it's still something that I have to live with. And it gives me a way to try to not make the same mistakes that I felt like was made around me and try to like project that and when I have kids for a better future for them and just even if I don't like just for going into the community and trying to benefit them and stuff.
Yeah, and actually that leads to our final question. We have less than 5 minutes left, so like I want to focus on this last question. Because you're now taking initiative, you're studying sacred knowledge in Egypt, wanting to improve your Arabic to eventually also study the other Islamic sciences, fiqh, aqidah, tazkiyah, and also like having the great experience of being in the presence of Habib Umar bin Hafiz, and his collective in Tarim, the brief time you got to go to his retreat in Yemen, but also you're primarily in Egypt. Like, what are the things that you would say you want to bring back to America when you come back from Egypt, and like bring to America, bring to the American Muslim community? What is it that you would feel like is your thing, your contribution that you would want to be your contribution to the growing American Muslim scene? And
Yeah,
you got less than 4 minutes.
yeah. Inshallah, I'll try to be quick. um I've thought about being here and being at TCR primarily. um I feel like um nowadays in like the community where I'm familiar with in Atlanta especially, I feel like I felt like when I came back from TCR, this like strong inclination amongst the youth to try to understand and learn knowledge. Like I really feel like, just the right person. I'm not saying that it's me. In some ways I hope that it's not me, but I want to help facilitate whoever does that, inshallah. But I feel like there's a want to learn, and I feel like that's the only way to preserve this tradition is through not through, I mean, that's all the other stuff is good, like economics, business, public policy, social stuff, try to get the Muslim youth, engaged politically in the political realm or whatever in America. But I also feel like, if, no one, and I'm especially thinking about the African Americans in Atlanta when I say this, is that if no one revives the dean, I feel like in the next couple of generations that you're gonna have, people who don't barely understand the dean at all, or you're gonna have people that are completely off the dean, or
Yeah. And from that perspective, it's like you want to provide, and even if not you, find a way to facilitate for someone where it's not just the book learning, but also the experiential learning. Because in your time in over there in the Middle East, you've had the benefit of not just getting to learn from sacred texts, but also getting to learn just from being in the company of the shuyukh that you've learned under.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that, a lot of people, back in Atlanta and Knoxville, I heard a lot about the prophetic model. Like that to me is the prophetic model, is to be in the presence of teachers. And I thought a lot about this being here, like being around different shuyukh, is that,
1 minute.
here learning the fiqh, and then seeing from people's character, combine them both, and then bringing that back to Atlanta, I feel like will have a profound impact
MashaAllah.
on
Yeah.
people of
Such as the
Atlanta,
Medina and Sira,
America
you would
as a
say.
whole.
Yeah, like the Medina and Sira, you would say.
Yeah.
Uh, Alhamdulillah, this has been a great time. Wish I could go further, but we must cut our time here. Thank you for your time, Sajid. I hope you continue building yourself up in Egypt. And Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Barakatuh. Hopefully we can see each other outside the Zoom space, inshallah,
I mean,
soon.
take care. Assalamu alaikum.